echo through the red clay hills, where the scent of longleaf floated pine reach up on past that Georgia line. Stroll through Tallahassee town or southern Appalachia bound. Take the local routes and journey down the roads we call our home.
Coming up on WFSU Public Media's Local Routes.
In the air and on the ground, we discover what happens to the waters of Lake Miccosukee when rainfall totals are low.
This sinkhole was actually expanded quite a bit since I was here just maybe 10 days ago.
Plus, join us on a special local route that is designed for high speed.
So you go faster than a motorcycle, faster than a car, faster than anything.
And this home is a witness to some major moments in Florida history. Join us at the Grove as we take a tour through the past.
Local Routes is next on WFSU.
Take the local routes and journey down the roads we call our home.
Welcome to Local Routes. I'm Suzanne Smith with WFSU Public Media, and today we're at Lake Miccosukee, east of Tallahassee. North Florida is full of remarkable waterways just like this one. That's due in part to the equally remarkable network of waterways that exists underground. WFSU producer Rob Diaz de Villegas recently caught up with geologist Harley Means at this lake, where low rainfall has exposed the connection between waters above and below.
The east side of Lake Miccosukee is drying up. The water's now low enough for us to come face to face with the forces that created it. Lake Miccosukee is the largest of the Red Hills region's natural lakes. We want to know where its water's going, and geologist Harley Means is going to show us.
So all this area around here is somewhat unstable, so watch your footing. We're in the Lake Miccosukee Basin. You're looking out across a sinkhole that is active right now and is taking lake water. So the lake is draining. You can actually see the high water mark on many of the trees out here, so you can see how low the water level is. But we've actually been in a deficit for rainfall. We really just haven't had much rainfall at all. So the combination of low rainfall coupled with the sinkhole activity in the bed of the lake is causing this lake basin to drain. So I define activity as anytime you've got active subsidence where you can actually see the ground surface is subsiding down into the void space that's down deep in the underlying limestone.
Harley really notices this kind of activity when we visit the second sinkhole.
This sinkhole was actually expanded quite a bit since I was here just maybe 10 days ago. And for instance, this tree right here wasn't in, and it is now. You can see all the roots hanging. I can tell that both of these waterfalls are actively cutting back, enlarging the basin here. So this thing is very active.
That last time he came, his friend Jeff Erb shot the drone footage we're using in the video. That's Jeff. You can see how much has changed in about 10 days.
We know immediately it drains into the underlying upper Floridan aquifer. But ultimately, we don't know the fate of this water. We know that once it gets into the aquifer here, into the limestone, it flows to the south. But interestingly, there are a couple of major springs just south of here, and we don't know enough about how the water moves once it gets into the underlying aquifer to know which one of those springs it might emerge at. So a neat thing to do would be to put some dye into here and then go down gradient and look to see where the dye comes out. And that would give us a better idea, obviously, of how this water is moving through the underlying aquifer.
In another lake, Harley climbed into the aquifer.
When Lake Jackson, for instance, when it went down and completely drained the last time, turns out the sinkhole was associated with a small cave system. So we actually lowered a ladder down into there and we went down and we actually explored and mapped this small cave, and we were literally underneath the bed of the lake. Lake Miccosukee is one of the 4 major lake basins we have here in Leon County. And what you're looking at behind me is this sinkhole. This is actually how those lake basins ultimately formed. So over geologic time, and we're talking, many, many thousands to millions of years, sinkhole activity would occur. And as these sinkholes opened up over time and they would take sediment and water, they would create low spots. More and more sinkhole activity would occur and these sinkholes would coalesce. And over time, they can form these nice big basins. And as you see, this basin is continuing to evolve, as are the other major lake basins, like for instance, Lake Jackson and Lake Iamonia. Both of those have active sinkholes in the beds of them, as does Lake Miccosukee. So you're looking at the mechanism behind how these lakes in Leon County form.
To recap, Harry Smith is a kayak guide in Tallahassee. He spends a lot of time on water that might have come from this lake.
It puts it all in perspective. You kind of see it, like I said, happening live in front of you. A lot of people don't realize that where this flows is all interconnected beneath us. And the fact that paddling on the Wasis or the St. Marks is the very same water that you're getting from Lake Miccosukee or Lake Iamonia, some of these other lakes around here. So it's all connected and it'll all get back to you one way or another.
For WFSU, I'm Rob Diaz de Villegas.
Discover more about the various waterways of North Florida at WFSU's Ecology blog.
Our next adventure takes a different type of local route in the form of a racetrack. WFSU's Charles Renaud had the need for a little speed, so he headed to Monticello to try out a racetrack there, to get behind the wheel and take a few laps. Well, this is his story, as well as his best impression of Speed Racer. Or maybe Racer X.
In previous segments, we've had a lot of world-class things. A world-class archer, world-class cheese, world-class pecan oil, even what's going to be a world-class beer. But now, world-class go-karts.
I found these world-class karts at the Monticello Karting and Motor Club. Like me, you're probably wondering how a track voted one of the 10 coolest go-kart tracks in the world by Complex.com wound up in Jefferson County, Florida. I got the answer from JC, John Christoph Correes, one of the owners of MKMC.
12 years ago, I think, we came up with the idea. I used to race open wheels in Europe when I was young and good looking. And 12 years ago, I took my son, who was 8-year-old, to drive karts in Europe, and he liked it. So we came back here and start looking for a place to race. And we find a track in Jacksonville. But after a while there, we decided to, see if we could do our own track. And a friend of mine named Pablo Montoya, who is Juan Pablo Montoya's father, told me he would design it for us because, we did a lot of design, but they were not great. So when he came on board, we started looking for land and everything. And I think in 2004, he sent us, there was during the Monaco Grand Prix, he sent us the design of the track, and it was so good that we say, you know what, we're going to build it. So we looked for land in Gadsden County, Leon County, and we went to Jefferson County, and here we are.
So how long is the track?
It's 1.1 mile, pretty much the longest track in the United States for karting. And I have to say, if we were going to build another one, we might build it a little bit shorter next time because it's really long.
But you have racers come here from all across the United States to race?
We have racers coming from all over the world.
All over the world.
We have done races where we had people from Italy, South America, France, Canada. I mean, they come from everywhere.
Well, JC, tell me about a lap out here. What's it like to race at Monticello Karting?
It's exciting. It's fast. It's a fast track. We have 19 turns. They all named after at least two-time Formula One champion. Karting is, I mean, a kart is the fastest vehicle you can have in a turn. The point here is not to go really, really fast in a straight lane, is to turn very, very fast. You 1-inch from the ground, you get 20 guys, you're fighting for position. I mean, it's very exciting.
What's the top speed?
The top speed, I would say 85, 86, but it don't really matter. We 86 on top of the hill up there, what we call the Fangio. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
You know, so, but like I say, you know, you go fast in turn, you go faster than a motorcycle, faster than a car, faster than anything.
Andrew Scott is the track manager and mechanic at the track. He described a typical race day.
Typically you get here in the morning once the track gates open around 9 o'clock. Gates are at 8, most people arrive around 9. Get your pit area set up, get your go-kart out, go through any last tuning you need to do, go out and practice a little bit, work on your setup for the day. You may need to do some carburetor adjustment depending on air temperature and track conditions. Then do the final checklist of everything before qualifying. We go to a driver's meeting and then we go through qualifying by class. It's usually an 8-minute session. Once that's done, they give you a little break, get ready, get your kart ready to go again, and then we run a heat race. Where you qualify determines where you start the heat race. Where you finish in the heat race determines where you start in the final. The final is usually held about 45 minutes after the heat race, and then the finishing position in the final determines your points for the championship.
Okay. Now, not everybody races on the same level. You have different classes. How do you break those out?
They're normally broken down by age, and then in some of the classes, like in the 125cc category that myself and some of the other employees here race in, we break it into a weight division where we have a light class and a heavy class.
There's sprint and there's endurance. What is the difference? I mean, obviously one's short, but only an endurance race, what are we looking at?
The chassis of the go-karts that we use for both classes are the same chassis, but the endurance race runs a Subaru Robin. It's a 4-stroke, 6-horsepower motor that we do a little tuning to, get it to around 12 or 13 horsepower, speed it up a little bit to make it interesting. But the sprint races are done with a 2-stroke motor, much higher RPM, higher powered, but also more violent and damaging to the parts, so they typically can't last for more than about 15-20 laps before you start tearing up sprockets and quicker wear parts. The endurance races,
how long do they last?
They typically run anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. We have run one 8-hour race where we actually had to do some stopping and doing some brake changes and actual oil changes, to where typically in the 4 or 5 hour races we just do some basic chain maintenance and refueling.
Wow, 8 hours in a kart.
That was a long day.
Okay, now we've got them here. How many racers can you expect in a day?
Typically our average for our sprint races is 8 to 12, I'd say average is 12. We had one race this season already that we had 20 entrants in one race in our class. Some of the younger classes were looking for more entrants. They typically have 3 to 5, but if people show up, they can enter. You know, this is a very long track. We have lots of space on track for very high kart field numbers.
Yes. So you can run 20 at one time.
Absolutely. There have been races, I think, as high as 40 entrants out here in some of the national races.
But the Monticello track isn't just for Pro-Am racers and racing. Ken Holland, the track manager emeritus, explained that the track is open to the general public.
But yeah, the public can come out and drive our karts. The rentals go about 45 miles an hour. They can enjoy this track. It's the cheapest way you can race.
Now, is there an age limit on when you can, what's the youngest that can come out?
Well, we have 3 sizes of karts. We have a kid's kart, a cadet kart, and we have full-size karts. The criteria is you've got to be able to reach the brake pedal and operate the brakes. If you can do that, we will put you on the track.
Okay. Is there anything that I have to do so when I come out, do I just jump in a kart? What's the prelims to be able to drive?
All first-time renters have to do a school. It's basically a go-kart 101. We talk about the rules of racing, the flags. We discuss getting the go-kart around the track, braking technique, driving techniques, just so that once we put people on the track, they've got a pretty good understanding of what they're doing. Our goal is for everybody to come out, drive as fast as they can, do as good as they can in the karts, but go home in one piece. We want everyone to be safe. You can imagine this kind of business, we've got to pay attention to that. When someone comes out to drive, we provide helmets, neck rings, jackets, and gloves. The only thing an individual needs to do is to remember to wear long pants and closed-toe shoes.
And they're ready to go.
And we'll get them in a go-kart.
So we can do birthday parties, we can do company gatherings, we can do family reunions, and
individuals walking in the gate. You can bring a group or, any size.
After taking Ken's class and getting suited up, there was only one thing left to do. Let's race.
Folks, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. We'd like to thank our friends at Monticello Karting for having us. And if you're looking for a world-class experience in a kart, you've now found the place. See you next time.
You can learn more about the Monticello Karting and Motor Club at mkmc.us.
The preserving and sharing of the past is the focus of this next story. WFSU's Mike Plummer went back in time to introduce us to the history of the Grove.
Adjacent to the governor's mansion in Tallahassee lies the Grove, one of the finest examples of Greek Revival architecture in the South and a link to America's past.
Think about this house as a witness to civil rights, but 100 years before that, a witness to the building of this home, to the conditions that existed in the antebellum period. As we've talked about, this home witnessed the sweep of history change from slavery, the absence of civil rights for women, the absence of civil rights for African Americans or other ethnic minorities in our country, to progress on those issues which very much continue to the present day.
Today, the Grove is a museum owned by the people of Florida. But before 1985, ownership of the Grove remained associated with a single family, some of which played major roles in our state's history, starting in the 1830s with a territorial governor.
Richard Keith Call, his main kind of origin of his rise to prominence was in his association with Andrew Jackson, that had really been built upon their relationship forged in warfare. He was a young soldier in the Creek War in 1813. He remained with Jackson's army in fighting that took place near Pensacola, and then the Battle of New Orleans, the famous Battle of New Orleans in 1815. And so that impressed upon Jackson that Call was a rising, and significant person. So when events led to the acquisition of Florida by the United States from Spain, Call was one of the people that Jackson identified who could be put into place in Florida to help set up the territorial government.
Jackson appointed Call as territorial governor in 1836. In 1841, he returned to the office for a second term after his successor died of yellow fever. Call was a slave owner, but he was also a Unionist, an unpopular local view to hold on the eve of the Civil War. And although he had deeded the property to his daughter, Ellen Call Long, in 1851, when the secession vote took place, the Grove received yet another footnote in history.
When Florida seceded from the Union, January 1861, the convention's held at the old Capitol, right? They vote to secede, and then they come here to the Grove in a story that's been told many times, to taunt Richard Keith Call and tell him, hey, guess what? We've seceded. What do you think about that? You know, you've been traveling around and trying to prevent this from happening. What do you think, old Call, right? He comes out on the porch and, according to his daughter's writings, says, you know, what have you done? You've opened the gates of hell, from which will flow the curses of the damned, which will sink you to perdition. That's his quote, according to his daughter.
Perdition or not, we all know how the Civil War ended. In the period following the Civil War and leading up to the turn of the century, much of the original land was sold off, leaving just 13 acres by 1905. The property went next to Ellen's granddaughter, Renette, and her husband, Charles Hunt.
Fast forward in time, in the years of the Great Depression, the relative that was living here was named Renette Long Hunt, and she was operating this property as a hotel in those years, from the 1920s into the 1930s, because like so many other people, she needed to try to make ends meet in those years. So she's converting spaces in the house on the second floor into hotel rooms so that she can rent those out. She's also building small rental cottages north of this house in what we could say is the back of the property, also renting those out to try to make ends meet.
In 1942, the house was purchased by State Senator and future Florida Governor Leroy Collins and his wife Mary Call Collins. While living in the house, the Collins family started the long, slow process of restoring and improving the residence. And the house again witnessed another period of great change and the actions of one of Florida's great statesmen.
This is a representation of Mrs. Collins as a historic preservationist in an era when national legislation for historic preservation was really just getting started. And so she furnished this room to represent how the home would have looked during the era of her great-grandfather, Richard Keith Call. And then Governor Collins, when he comes into office, of course, the context is the civil rights movement and the period in the South following the ruling by the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. And he becomes intimately involved in the response of the state of Florida, and then of course the evolution of the civil rights movement as far as it relates to the national legislation passed in 1964, Civil Rights Act, 1965. So he's involved in a lot of these, a lot of this history as it's kind of developing in the 60s. With Collins, we talk a lot about civil rights, and that's the defining characteristic of his career. But he was also a huge proponent of education. He helped the community college system expand tremendously when he was in office. When he was a young man, he didn't have the money to go to UF. This was a women's college here, Florida State College for Women, so he went out of the state, saved money, went to an accelerated program, and when he was governor, he said, I'm gonna help to establish a school of higher education so that every person in Florida can reasonably drive there, and they can get their 2-year degree, and then they can go on to maybe the 4-year schools if they so desire. He was a big reader and a big student of history. He was really, if you look at and listen to a lot of his speeches from his time as governor and then through the rest of his career, he was very regularly evoking different stories, biblical references. He made references in his speech to the state of Florida after the sit-in demonstrations here in March 1960. He referenced the play, The Trial of Pontius Pilate, and he also referenced a Hindu story. So he was really wide-ranging in the things that he could pull from and the things that occurred to him while he was trying to put into context the issues that the people were facing in his time in office. One of the great touchstone pieces is this pen that we have on display. Oh, okay. So the pen here was used by President Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act. And the president has the, ability to use many pens and give many pens to many people, but it is one of the pens used to sign. And he wrote a note to Governor Collins, a man of peace, understanding, and goodwill. And that kind of encapsulates a lot of his viewpoint. Governor Collins, throughout the whole process, was very committed to the idea that the country, the United States, was a country of laws, and that he was going to ensure that Florida followed the laws as they were evolving, and that the most disastrous thing for the country would be to descend into some kind of terrible violence over the civil rights movement, and that it was really up to people like him who had the ability to help chart a more moderate course for the country during those very turbulent times. And I'll tell you what conditioned his thinking on that. As a veteran of World War II, witnessing what had happened in Europe, the rise of extremism, to people like Collins, you know, this was not a foregone conclusion we would be where we are today. And if the country did not handle the civil rights movement in an appropriate way, in a way that opened up equality to more people, who knows what could have happened in the past. The grounds are a great place for people to come and enjoy the natural setting here at the Grove. We have over 100 different plant varieties that are planted on the property, and we'll even take people on tours of that. And if you just want to come out and sit at a picnic table and enjoy lunch, or sit under an oak tree and read a book, or walk along the paths, let your kids run wild out here, even bring your dog on a leash to enjoy a nice day at the Grove. It's all available to people here.
At the Grove in Tallahassee, for WFSU Public Media, I'm Mike Plummer.
Tours of the Grove House are available Wednesday through Saturday at set times, while the grounds are open those days from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Learn more at thegrovemuseum.com.
A new documentary is coming soon to WFSU. It's called Tell Them We Are Rising, and it focuses on the history of black colleges and universities.
WFSU held a special screening of the film in January, along with a panel discussion that included the film's director, Stanley Nelson. You can see Tell Them We Are Rising on WFSU and Independent Lens Monday, February 19th at 9 p.m. Eastern. The panel discussion we recorded on FAMU's campus will air immediately following it at 10:30 p.m. It's called Family Rising. Learn more about the documentary and about the history and legacy of Florida A&M University at wfsu.org/HBCU Rising. Funding for this project is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting as part of the Public Media Initiative American Graduate. Let's make it happen.
That's it for this episode of Local Roots. I'm Suzanne Smith at Lake Miccosukee. Check out other stories on our website, wfsu.org/localroots. And remember to like us on Facebook while you're at it. For everyone at WFSU Public Media, thanks for watching. Have a great week, everyone.
Magnolia trees greet the southern breeze in the land where rivers wind. Seeds that spring up from the past leave us treasures yet to find. Where our children play along the land our fathers build with honest hands. Take a moment now and look around the paradise we have found. Take the local